Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, the place where we talk all things records. So today I'm going to be doing a new series called Stereo versus Mono. Now this has been done many times before, but I thought it'd just be interesting to have a little sort of block of videos, if you like, about albums and their stereo mono counterparts. I've done this sort of stemmed from that Sergeant Pepper video I did a fair while back. It's not Sergeant Pepper unless it's in mono. I'll leave a little card up there if you want. But today we're going to do some Stones to start off this series. So we're going to be looking at Beggars Banquet, mono versus stereo. So I'm very lucky to have both stereo and mono first pressings on this unboxed Decca label. Hopefully you can see there with the snow box. And it's the flat label without the groove because it's past the summer of 1968. I've also got a monocopy here on the unboxed as well. No, this has got an early one because it's got BU sort of stampers, 1BU, 1B, 1U, sorry, stampers. So quite an early one this. It's not in amazing shape, but it's pretty damn good. And it is certainly interesting because the only track that's actually a mix is Sympathy for the Devil on the mono, but the rest is just a file down. So it is still interesting to hear because you do get some discrepancies in how things sound, especially No Expectations sounds brilliant on this mono one, I think. And that sort of is where I'm going to start off, because one thing you will notice when you're listening to this album is generally, overall, both versions have a tendency to be quite bright, I've found. Quite sort of, not thin, but there's a lot of top end there. And there is low end, but that kind of gets a bit muddied up. So I think easily the best sounding track on this album, both mono and stereo, is Sympathy for the Devil. It just simply, it's the spread across the speakers is perfect in my opinion. That's why, getting onto that point actually, that's why it's a mono dedicated on the mono version, because when you fold down the stereo version of Sympathy for the Devil, the piano disappears because the piano was recorded out of phase. So that's why it's interesting to own this version for the unique mix, itself. And if we go to my stereo copy here, I'll talk about the stereo for a second. Now this again was 68, so it's still when stereo was being experimented with and that sort of thing. So like I just said, Sympathy for the Devil is a great balance, and so are like No Expectations and Street Fighting Man. I'd say they're the best stereo mixes on the album, because some of the others are kind of just a sort of thinner stereo, I mean in terms of width. So you can get like really wide, like left and right, and some of them are kind of thin, like slightly slimmer in a way. I hope that's the right word if you understand, sort of thing. So that's why I think it's interesting that it's kind of like the White Album. You want to try both versions. Overall, I would say that the stereo probably, catch that copy there, the stereo wins out only just, and I mean only just, because the mono rounds off some of that top end a bit nicer. For example, because of course inner groove distortion is a thing on like Salt of the Earth and sort of Jigsaw Puzzle, trying to remember it there, but so Salt of the Earth and Jigsaw Puzzle, they have a tendency to, because they're quite sort of long songs, when you get right into the end, the high end kind of, not fizzles, but you know what I mean, like it kind of distorts a bit. So the mono does help to round that off, as long as it's a clean copy, because this one is worn, it's kind of a similar issue, but still not in the same way. Because the low end that you get when you fold down to mono kind of helps cover that up a bit. But for the stereo, Street Fighting Man as well is another interesting track to compare, because in the mono you get that punch sort of thing, as well as Parachute Woman, but Street Fighting Man is stereo. You get a really nice air, and you can hear like Charlie's drums better and Keith's lot of layered guitars and that sort of thing. So that's why it's really hard to decide. So I would say overall, if you want a sort of definitive version, go for the stereo, because Sympathy for the Devil and all the other tracks are true stereo, proper mixes. Really the mono, which I've got here, just to show you this is my monocopy. The mono is more of a collectible item, I would say. It's really lovely to have to listen to as well, but it is one that people go kind of own just to say, oh, I have it in mono and that sort of thing. And it is kind of like the Let It Bleed. It's fairly hard to get, especially in decent shape. I managed to get this one for £20 off of eBay, just because I got lucky with an offer. So, and by the way, the matrices are on that label there if you want to read them. That's the earliest, by the way, as well. And I've got a really early stereo matrices as well, because usually they're not both 1K, they're usually 1K, 2K. So hopefully you guys can see that a bit better. I noticed the camera kind of went out a bit. And so speaking of matrices, I will just say very quickly that for Decca, the coding sort of word is Buckingham. So it'd be B equals 1, U equals 2, and that, so on and so forth. Because it's similar to the sort of EMI one, which was Gramophone Limited, LTD. So it's just different words and that sort of thing. And there is Stones on Decca. I highly recommend that website. I'll leave a link in the description because they're really good for the label versions as well, and also the cover versions. And I also will very quickly mention in this video that if you have an earlier copy of Beggars Banquet for the cover, it will have patents pending in that corner there. So even though I've got an early disc, it's just got a slightly later cover. And when I say later, I mean by, it's really minuscule. Sorry. It's really not that important. It's just a nice little collectible feature as well. So hopefully you've enjoyed this first episode in my series of stereo versus mono, and thank you for watching.